أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له الملك الحق المبين وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وخليله وأمينه وروحه يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وانظروا نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. Dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, all praise and glory and thanks are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We owe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala everything we have, وما بكم من نعمة فمن الله. And we are dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all our needs. الناس الفقراء إلى الله وهو الغني الحميد. These two feelings, if you work on them, the fact that Allah has given us so much, and the fact that all our needs are in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will strengthen your relationship with Allah beyond your imagination. One will bring you to Allah through the door of hamd and shukr, and one will bring you to close to Allah through the door of dua and supplication and feeling of the faqr with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, as we are celebrating the new year, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it a blessed one, inshallah, for all of us and for all people. Allah alleviate the suffering of people all over the world and help putting an end to all these tragedies and massacres and wars. It's a good opportunity for us to do some self-assessment. What did we achieve last year? And also to make some resolutions. It's never late to make some resolution for the next year, because usually when you set goals for yourself, it gives you some motivation to try to achieve it. It's like you're challenging yourself. You're challenging yourself, so you try to meet those targets. So make for yourself several objectives in different fields, in terms of your health, in terms of your knowledge, in terms of your deen, in terms of your profession, all aspects of life, and then challenge yourself to achieve them. My dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, as I mentioned last time, there is a right approach of dealing with what happens to us. And when I say what happens to us, is at all levels: individual, family, communities, societies, etc. It starts with the proper diagnosis. It's extremely important. And that's the step that can take you the right way or the wrong way. If you don't treat the event properly, it's like a medical doctor who does not have the proper diagnosis. Everything that's going to follow is going to be wrong. Why? Because the diagnosis was wrong. So make sure that you read the event correctly. And don't be fragile. Read it as it is, regardless of any mistake that you made, regardless of how bad the situation. It's in your best interest to read it as it is. So proper diagnosis. And you know what diagnosis is in medicine. You go from the symptoms to the root causes. Symptoms, you have fever, you have this, you have that, blood test, let's find out what's wrong. So from the symptoms to the root causes, to understand what happened exactly. And I can tell you an example, just an example that we're living now. There are different reading of the events in Syria. Different reading. And every reading will take you in a certain direction. If your assessment is that the revolution fought the regime of Assad, defeated it, and took over, and now it's the revolution that is in charge, and this will lead you to expect that they are going to implement the objectives of the revolutions, and you can go home and relax. So that's one reading. There is a different reading will lead in a different direction. So very important to have the proper reading of the situation. And in 1956, a major defeat for Nasser was projected as a victory. And based on that, he became a great leader. Why? Because there was a defeat. 1956 was a defeat. But it was projected as a victory. And then he became battle of that victory. And then based on that, I don't know how much Egyptian people suffered and everybody else. Just because the wrong assessment or reading of an event. And then it was repeated in 67. It was one of the worst defeats in history, and it was called next. It was belittled. Again, the wrong reading. You read the things the wrong way. Then we have the second step, like any physician would do, it's a family history. So, what happened, and then how and why it happened this way. How and why you came to this point. 3 questions you need to answer them properly. What happened exactly, how and why we came to this point. That will give you the right understanding. And when you are developing that understanding, please seek the truth, not what is known. Seek the truth. Try to find the truth. Have the bravery and the courage to look for the truth, even if it is ugly, even if it is brutal, regardless. Look for the truth. Don't look for something that will make you feel good. Then, all right, we got the point. So, future. Where do you want to go from here? Vision, they call it vision. Vision is meaning what? Vision meaning if everything is done correctly, that goal will be achieved. Vision is like a dream. You work for it to make it a reality. So developing a vision, again, if it is not done correctly, there will be problems. Every step of these, every one of these, if it is not done properly, it will lead to problems. Example, the vision was for people at a certain point, our fathers and grandfathers, when they were occupied, their dream was independence. Was it wrong? No, it was not wrong, but it was limited. It should not have been the ultimate dream. It should have been, that's our first objective, to push, but there should be, what is next? The day after. There was none. So people celebrated, relaxed, and you know what happened after that. Same thing recently with the Arab Spring. We go revolution to topple regimes. Nobody was thinking about the day after. There was no vision. So goal achieved, but nothing happened afterwards. So it's very important, and that's what Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did very effectively when he kept raising the bar. Every time the companions and his community and movement come close to achieve a goal, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam will push it higher. Why? So that he will keep that momentum and that unity. Because when people relax, people lose momentum, and then division comes to the surface. When people are mobilized, they are united. And Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did it in a very successful way. Right? We decided on your destination. What's your strategy to get there? And these are, even though they are big words, but they apply even to our personal life. Okay. I want to be a physician. So what's your strategy? Have a plan. And then execute that plan diligently. Because you can get all the steps correctly. But then if you fail in the execution, nothing is going to get done. So all these steps, they have to be done correctly. And then what? And then as you are executing, always reassess and be open to make adjustment or even to do course correction. Course correction, if it turns out that you're not on the right direction, don't be stubborn. Be flexible. Always reassess. How far am I going in this goal? Is it still worth it? Is it still the right thing to do, etc.? Adjustments to plan, sometimes even adjustment to goals. Adjustment to plans, adjustment to goals or course corrections. And that's again what happened with the prophetic movement, which was really very, very successful. Failure of the Arab Spring, I told you. it was the wrong assessment or reading of the problem, and then there was no ultimate vision, and therefore things collapsed after achieving the limited goal. Why there was the wrong assessment? We come to that. Because yes, dictatorship is a problem and it has to go, but that's the tip of the iceberg. That's 10% that you see. The problems in our societies are much deeper than just removing a dictator. People's mindset was corrupted and people's manners were corrupted, and things are so deep. So that's why we found out, we discovered that eliminating dictators, but nothing has changed because the problems have much deeper roots. And also, many disasters in our history and in our recent history happened because of what? Because of miscalculations. You don't plan or build on facts, you build on wishful thinking. Oh, we will do this, inshallah, this will happen and that will happen. It did not. Based on what? You build on facts and statistics. You don't build on wishes. A lot of miscalculations and a lot of examples. We started with Iraq. Iraq was destroyed completely because of one miscalculation. And still, I know that some people may not like it, but I still believe that October 7th, it was a miscalculation. Things were not calculated properly. And I think if you face those who made that decision and you tell them, they can acknowledge that we planned on things, but they did not happen. We thought 1, 2, 3, 4 things are going to happen, but they did not. So there was, again, miscalculations. So we're going to apply this approach to our situations as to the bigger picture. As Muslims nowadays, let's try to apply this approach. And as I mentioned last time, there are two major narrations that will about our situation and about our history. I'm going to tell you the one that I don't believe in. And unfortunately, in the majority of Muslims, they subscribe to it. This narration says what? It says, number one, we are okay. And if we're not okay, we're on the right track. So inshallah, we'll get there. Yeah. So we're on the right track. So some people tell you, we are okay. Islam is growing, alhamdulillah, we have mosques and we have this and that. And those who are more humble will tell you, at least we are on the right direction, on the right track. Okay? And then what? And then they will tell you that when it comes to, that's our reality. When it comes to the reading of their history, our history, and by the way, I keep saying, it is the history of Muslims, not the history of Islam. There is a huge difference between the two. Because when you say history of Islam, you cannot criticize it. It has to be all arousing. Everything was great. But when you say it was a history of Muslims, that these are human beings, they did some very good things, but they did bad things. Because they're people, they're human beings, they're not infallible. So, what's the reading, the common reading of our history? It was all great. It was all great. Islam was in good shape for all these centuries, and Muslims were in good shape for all these centuries. So what happened? We just had a problem, an accident, which is collapse of the Ottoman Khilafah or state, and then colonization, and people deserted Islam, and all of that was fixed. Alhamdulillah, we have a liberation movement, we pushed the occupation out, and we had the Islamic movement that brought people back to Islam, so alhamdulillah, case closed. That's in the minds of the majority of Muslims. Wallahi, this is, I don't know how you can call it that, because there are so many flaws in it. And then when it comes to the why we're not getting the right outcome, or the logic outcome, if everything was great and we had an accident in the way, and that accident is fixed now. So why we are in this shape? So let's start tell you my narration. I hope that we one day will accept it, because it's never too late to fix things. The moment you accept reality and you apply this approach properly, you can fix things. But you need to get out of denial and out of deceiving self-deception, and then start the correct way, proper diagnosis and all the steps, and we can get there. And my understanding is that the true Islam was lost centuries ago. And we Muslims lost our way centuries ago. And we are yet to find it. Shocking. I'm sorry, but that's what they believe. The true Islam, the Islam preached by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that produced those great people and that great success story, was lost more than 13 centuries ago. It's very brutal, but we need to accept the reality. And I'm going to explain it. And then we, as Muslims, lost our way at the same time. Both. We lost the true Islam and we lost our way at the same time. How? The true Islam that was preached by Muhammad ﷺ, at the heart of it is a sense of mission and maqasid, ultimate purposes. And these were suppressed or eliminated from Islam from the moment, and the moment I'm pointing to is very simple. The end of Khilafah Rashida, the start with the Umayyad state or dynasty. By the way, Ibn Khaldun wrote his book is filled of the word dawla, state. But those who translated it, they translated it to dynasty. They said we didn't have a state, that's hukm aila. That's, in English they call it dynasty, they don't call it state. Because there were no institutions. It's the family rule, and family rule in English is dynasty. And I'm surprised why they were refusing regime like the Syrian regime. It was family, inherited. But that's exactly what happened for 12 centuries. Now what we miss, it's what we see now and we reject it, we accepted it for more than 12 centuries. So, lost again. That transition, we went from Khilafah Rashida, where all the political principles of Islam implemented, into the dynasty rule. What does it mean, dynasty rule? Why I say Islam, the true Islam was lost? Because the true Islam and the dynasty rule cannot coexist. The true Islam and that system of governance, they cannot coexist together. Why? Because the true Islam tells you that you are someone with natural right, that you are free. That Allah has given you right that nobody can take away. The true Islam will give you a mission. At the heart of it is Islah and Amr Ma'ruf and Nahy Anil Munkar and standing out firmly for justice. All of this is not suitable for that kind of government, for that kind of governance. So they cannot coexist. And that's why Islam was mutilated. Mutilated means all these elements that inspire people and empower them were removed. And what was left Islam of sha'air and fiqh, personal fiqh. And that doesn't bother anybody. And that's the Islam that remained for all these centuries, and that's the one that we inherited, and that's the one that the contemporary Islamic movement or revival brought back. So we brought back, even that mutilated Islam was lost, And then when we brought back, we did not bring back the original version. We brought the defected version. And then we have the second factor that brought us to this point is the freezing of ijtihad. And it's very, very logical. They go hand in hand. Why? Because the part of Islam that is left, the rituals and the personal fiqh, does not require ijtihad. I mean, what ijtihad we're going to do in prayer and fasting, other than the ones that were done by the madahib? That's it. So people were really consistent with themselves when they say we don't need ijtihad anymore. And that also was convenient for those rulers. Why? Because those rulers don't want people to think. I mean, if you want to have an absolute power, you need subjects, not citizens. You want people who listen and obey. That's why you see the sama' and ta'a, it's so much emphasized in our heritage, in our Torah. Why? Because that's what was needed, and it's listen and obey. Don't think. So, moving from Khilafah Rashida into dynasty rule, freezing ijtihad, and the rest is history. You have an Islam that was mutilated by that dynasty rule and then frozen for centuries. And that's what we inherited. Again, because Islam liberates people, Islam gives them natural life, natural rights, Islam gives them sense of mission, etc. And all of this is not suitable. And why ijtihad was frozen, stopped? Because people were afraid of bid'ah. And we want to protect Islam. How are you going to protect it? Freeze it. Islam cannot survive without ijtihad. Ijtihad is like the lifeline of Islam. That's what keeps it vibrant. That's what keeps it relevant. You freeze it, it will be detached from life. Why? Because you freeze Islam, but life is going to continue to evolve. And then you have a gap between Islam and life. So it was a reaction, very good intention. By the way, that's how the dynasty rule was established. It was a reaction to the Fitna al-Kubra, to the civil bloody war that happened among Muslims. And number two, as I said, the rituals and the personal fiqh does not require ijtihad. So you have Shafi'i and Malik and that's it, enough. All of them have fatwa for salah and fasting and zakat, etc. And number three, as I said, dynasty rule don't like people to think. But you can say that in our history there was some bright period. Yes, that's true. There's no question about it. We have great civilizations and we have some great days. So how can I reconcile the two? Number one, it was all dependent on the person of the Khalifa. You have an enlightened Khalifa, things will work out. You have a corrupt one, things will collapse. So it was all dependent on the individual. Yes, those individuals were prepared, and that's why some of them was great. Some of them were great, and in their time, things flourished. And there was and if you think about it, where did we excel? Only in the areas that were permissible. Architectures, this doesn't bother Khalifa. Blacks, the contrary, they want it. They want that. So they promoted things that will not challenge their role. And on top of this, please read what happened to the scholars and scientists in our history. Because that's the part of history that you never hear about. What happened even to the leaders of the former era? All tortured, persecuted, all of them. What happened to the scientists? Read. Go and look up. It's so easy nowadays to find out. Those scientists that we are very proud of, what happened to them? The books of Ibn Rushd. Ibn Rushd, his books, we burned them.
in front of his eyes. The rest of his books were the foundation of the Western civilizations. And they said it, they acknowledged that. The books that we did not burn. No, we burned many of his books. Whatever was left, they say it was very inspiring for the Western civilizations. So let's see it as is, because that will help. So let's see, there are some bright pages in our history, but again, we have to see the whole picture. Now, why we accepted this dynasty rule? Why? It's not Islamic at all. It's not Islamic. Why did we accept it again? That takes us a step back. Again, when Muslims found themselves fighting each other in bloody civil wars, it was a very shocking event for people. They were looking for stability at any cost, at any price. And that's very normal. Just go to any countries nowadays that goes into civil war, they will tell you we need somebody to establish law and order. Even if they are dictators, that's fine. We just need stability. We need to go out and not to be afraid. So the reaction to that bloody civil war, 2 wars among Muslims, that people could not believe that it can happen. These are companions. And we're talking about only a short time after the death of Rasul, and people fought those bloody wars. So people, including the scholars, were looking for stability at any cost, at any price. When Muawiyah established that, they welcomed it. And you cannot blame them. Not up to this moment, you cannot blame them. The problem happened when this became permanent. And when they legitimized. When they issued fatwa called حكم متغلب or متسلط. Whoever comes to power, regardless of how, and they establish law and order, they are legitimate. And believe it or not, we Muslims, until this moment, we have that in our mind. A large segment of Muslims, they will welcome anybody who establishes law and order. Why? Because of that fatwa from that time. As if the only alternative for us is either dictatorship or civil war. So you don't want the dictatorship? Do you want us to go into civil war? These are the only options? Is there any third option, like other nations? But we accepted deep in our psyche, in our subconscious, that these are the options, and therefore, if there is dictatorship and there is stability, that's fine. That's what allowed us to accept this type of system for so long. Now, why Muslims came into that bloody war, civil war, fitna war? Inshallah, we'll explain this more in details, but just to give you a brief explanation that unfortunately is not very emphasized in the books of literature. It's not mystery. It's not puzzle. Muslims at the time of Umar ibn Khattab went from a small community into the superpower of the world in the span of few months. Go back and look for the 2 historical battles that they classify them among the battles that changed history. Yarmouk and Qadisiyah. Yarmouk and Qadisiyah, they classify them as the 2 battles, among the 50 battles or so that changed the history of humanity. They happened 3 months apart. So Muslims absorbed the 2 superpowers of the time within 3 months. With that simple system they had in Medina, now they are ruling the world, the whole world, because the Roman Empire with the Battle of Yarmouk and the Persian Empire with the Battle of Qadisiyah. Before you used to have few people come to Islam, individuals, and maybe tribe. Now you have millions. Hypocrite and conspiracy and you name it. All of that came at once. you have no capacity to absorb this. And subhanAllah, Umar ibn Khattab noticed this. Yes, it was late, but he noticed when he stopped, said, that's it. Enough is enough, no more. He realized that they took something that is more than they can show at that time. Because their integration capacity, they used to integrate one person at a time into the community, a few people at a time, and now having a million. And then especially the administrative capacity. This gap between simple, primitive system and an empire, sometimes I use the example, say, you used to have a small convenience store, and then you bought the Walmart, but you're running it with the same system that you had before, same system of the convenience. You can't. It's a huge. So that gap was covered for several years by the unique personality of Umar ibn Khattab. That's what masked the problem. And then it came afterwards. After his death, anhu, it was clearly because Umar ibn Khattab, when it comes to justice, when it comes to charisma, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to decisiveness, you name it, it's one of the unique personality that happened in history. It's not something that happens. And Uthman ibn Affan, great companions, but these are skills. It has nothing to do with you are afraid or not. These are skills. He did not have the same ability or capacity. And of course, by the time Ali ibn Abi Talib came, it was already messy. It was already messy. We'll come back to this, but it's very important to understand and become at peace with ourselves. When we understand our reality, accept it, understand how we came to this point, these are the requirements for us to start building a bright future, inshallah, in our world. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستعين ونتوب إليه نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, again, don't be afraid to ask the tough questions and don't be afraid to look for the truth. It is the best way, believe me, in every aspect of life. It's seeking the truth and building on it. It's always in your best interest compared to seeking what is convenient. And then build on it, you end up in troubles that you can avoid. So let's recapitulate. Basically, proper diagnosis, try to understand your reality as is, not as you like. Try to understand how and why it developed and you came to this point. And then if you get these steps correct, then decide on your future and then develop a plan and execute it diligently. Believe me, if we apply this simple approach at all levels, things will be very, very different. Inshallah. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم اشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا. توفنا وتراضى عنا. واختم بالصالحات أعمالنا. واجعل خير أعمالنا خواتمها وخير أيامنا من اللقاء. ربنا ارحم والدينا كما ربونا صغارا وارحم موتانا جميعا موتى المسلمين. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الصلاة.